can we talk about Roadwarden and how Roadwarden structures its game to make the choices hit just a little bit differently. So if you don't know, Roadwarden was released this year. It was developed by a studio called Moral Anxiety Studio. And it's a sort of choose your own adventure / text-based / RPG type game. And it has a unique approach to choices in video games that I want to just talk about briefly today. So I think if you were to poll RPG players on what an RPG actually is, I think you'll get two main answers. The first answer you get is it's a stat-based game where you level up, you pick skills, you throw fireballs, you roll dice, etc., etc. The more mechanical approach. Or the second viewpoint, I think, is an RPG is a game about choices. It's a game about creating your character and role-playing as that character in a world. And it's that latter response I just want to focus on a bit on this video. So I don't think anyone will argue that choices in video games, and especially RPGs, are important. They can give your character flavor, it can enhance the game's replayability, and it's what separates your game and character from everybody else's.
I'm sorry, Ash. I had to make a choice.
I understand, Commander. I don't regret a thing.
But when we think about choices for a moment and making choices in an RPG, what do we actually mean by that? So when I think about choices in video games and specifically RPGs, I think about the simple, do you want to be a good guy or do you want to be a bad guy? Do you want to be funny? Do you want to be irreverent, quick to anger, authoritarian? Do you want to have a halo over your head or do you want to have devil horns, basically? Crucially, the thing about choices I think that we make in video games is a lot of the time we decide before the game has even started on what those choices are going to be. On this run I want to play as a paragon. On this run I'm going to be the lich. It's a form of paint, of decoration we put on our character as we play through the game. But what's interesting about our choices is they never really affect the outcome of the game. So what do I mean by that? Because initially that might sound a bit stupid. Of course choices affect the game. But when you sit down to play an RPG video game, there's always a beginning and an end, right? There just has to be. And unless you stop halfway through after too many game overs, the end is always going to be with your victory. You are going to complete the goal at the end. It's decided in most games before you even make your first decision that you, as long as you can overcome the mechanical challenge the gamer is presenting, will beat this video game. Whatever world-ending problem your character must face, whatever super clever villain the game puts up against you, you will ultimately solve it. Or at least you will conclude it as long as you play the appropriate amount of hours and you click your buttons properly. So obviously this isn't how choices work in the real world. We've all been in situations where we've had a problem ahead of us and we've made poor choices or poor decisions which lead to that situation getting worse. I'm trying to lose weight at the moment, that's my long-term goal, and last Saturday night I chose to have a pizza with my wife from the takeaway. And let's be honest, that pizza is deadly. I'm probably going to do something similar this weekend. My goal is to lose weight, but if I keep choosing to eat takeaway at the weekend, I'm going to fail at my goal. But in a video game, I can choose to take the most counterintuitive, idiotic decisions and I'm still going to beat the game. So really, when it comes down to it, choices don't matter in terms of concluding the story. So what do they do then? Well, in most RPGs, they do two things. Number one, they allow you to put a personality on your character, as we already mentioned. And secondly, they affect the periphery of the game. So your companions being a big one, romances, characters living and dying, getting to know companions, unlocking their side stories, etc. How the world reacts to you. If you've chosen to be a good person, do they all cheer when you arrive? Do you save people? If you choose to be a bad person, do they fear you? So this is when the tabletop geeks come in and say, aha, but you see, this is why you really can't have an RPG within a video game. Tabletop RPGs have a dungeon master who is able to adapt to your choices and actions, which is something a computer can never replicate. See, I would respond to that and say, well, we're making great strides in artificial intelligence, and no, I'm kidding. They're sort of right. but I think not wholly right. It's true that you will never have a more adaptable game to your choices than a tabletop RPG. You just can't. It's a human, especially that human is someone like Matt Mercer. They'll listen to your choices and they'll make subtle changes, even that the smartest video game RPG just cannot do. But in terms of your choices actually mattering to your goal, I'm not sure it's all that different. The vast majority of DMs will have a beginning and an end to their story. Any campaign book I've ever read has a beginning and an end. And for the most part, the advice from the DMs is to roll with your players' choices. Now, people might say, of course, the players can make, bad decisions and they can party wipe and, we have to start again. But I find a lot of the time that's something that Dungeon Masters or people that talk about RPGs say a lot but never actually put into practice. Most DMs try to avoid total party wipes, and if it actually happens, they'll just create another party and continue with the story somehow. It's very, very rare that a campaign just ends. Now, this might happen from some DMs, but on the whole, like I said, the advice that you see for DMs is to roll with your players' choices, give them freedom, and don't punish them too hard. So I think what it comes down to is really the structure of the game in question is key when we talk about choices. If your game has a story with a beginning and an end, you're more than likely going to get your player to that end regardless of the choices they've made. But what happens if we change that traditional structure? In Roadwarden, you play as a Roadwarden. Someone skilled at travelling alone through remote or dangerous parts of the world. You've been hired by a powerful merchant guild who sent you to a very remote and mysterious peninsula in the hopes of expanding your guild's influence even further. And also making contact with the previous Roadwarden who was sent to explore the peninsula before you. Those at the start of the game are your only two goals. And after 40 days, whatever happens, you have to leave the peninsula and report back to the guild. Instantly, our structure now has changed. The game has a beginning and an end, yes, but crucially it's not linked to our goals or a story. You could spend the 40 days sleeping in the wilderness, accomplishing nothing and ending the game. Or you can dive into the world Moral Anxiety Studio has created and achieve your goals to the best of your ability. Crucially, the game does not care. After 40 days, you're done, regardless of what you've accomplished. A storyline that you're halfway through that you really wanted to finish to the end? Tough. You have two goals. It sounds straightforward enough, right? Fucking wrong. This peninsula is absolute hell on earth. The roads are treacherous and the people are treacherous, sir. As you play through the days, you're trying to accomplish your goals. You'll come across many, many more goals. Some of which, as you play through, you might actually begin to seem more important than the goals you originally set out to accomplish. But now look at you. It's day 20, you're halfway through your quest log, and it's a complete mess. You're broke, you haven't washed in days, causing you to smell so bad that people are actively trying to stay away from you. Where's the Roadwarden you were supposed to find? Who? What Roadwarden? What? Well, these lads need me to help them hunt a giant pebbler, whatever the fuck that is, and then I have to bleed onto this tree tomorrow, and now it's day 35 and shit! The writing in Roadwarden has a way of wrapping itself around you and pulling you into the bleak lives of these people on the peninsula, and there really just isn't enough time in the day. You will end your first playthrough of Roadwarden without accomplishing all of your goals that you want to, but you will accomplish some of them, and it's your choices in the game that dictate how many of them you do. So hopefully we've established that the choices are important in Roadwarden, and they're more than flavour. Now, if that's the case, the type of person you are in Roadwarden matters too. You can try to play the bad guy who always says rude things, or the aloof guy who doesn't really get friendly with everyone, but that's going to affect your goals. There are a lot of ways we can look at this, but because I don't want this video to run on, I'm going to focus on one, and that is... Money affects a lot of people's decision making in the real life. That just goes without saying. Our world in general has become a lot worse because of that. But in general, with video games, money rarely comes into the equation, and why would it? All we need to do is loot the bodies of our enemies and sell their shit, right? By the end of almost every RPG I've ever played, I finished the game with enough money to buy Twitter and burn it to the ground with terrible decision making. But Roadwarden is different. In Roadwarden, money buys you convenience. Money buys you time. And most importantly, money helps you accomplish your goals. There's a town you come across early in Roadwarden named Howler's Dell. It immediately stands out due to the relative prosperity that's evident in the village. Unlike the rest of the people on the peninsula who are just getting by, Howler's Dell is actually doing pretty good. The people are well fed, they have a roof over their head and security, and they're happy, both with the quality of their life they lead and with their leader, a woman named Thais. Thais becomes sort of an early game quest engine for a lot of players, both because of how easy it is to come across her. Howler's Dell is going to be the first main village you come across, and as you do so, you're literally told at the gates upon your first arrival that she wants to see you. And because of how she's willing to give you quests. A lot of the time in Roadwarden, you need to get people's trust before they start actually giving you work. But Thais has jobs that need doing. Unsurprisingly, considering the success of the town, she's willing to pay well to do them. I want to try and paint you a picture of my encounter with Thais on my first playthrough. I'd spent too much money in the first inn I came across, and by the time I found my way to Howler's Dell, I was broke, I was filthy, I was hungry, and although it was only day 3, I was getting a little bit concerned about how much I was actually going to accomplish. Then Thais came along, asked me to talk to the villagers of Howler's Dell to get some jobs and earn some trust, and as I did so, they paid me. Then she gave me jobs, and she paid me very well, and she put me back on my feet. Money in Roadwarden is a godsend. It makes everything easier. And after helping her out a little bit, I had enough money for several nights in the local inn, run by her husband. I was clean, my belly was full, armour repaired, and I could even afford items that would help me navigate the treacherous roads the peninsula had waiting for me. But what was this gnawing feeling I had lurking in the back of my mind? Something a scavenger I met the day before said to me, "Don't ask Thais where the money comes from." You eventually learn, if you want to, that Thais and the prosperity she has led Howler's Dell to are extremely problematic. She is not a good person, and she's done some horrific things to get to where she is and to get to where the town is. But she has jobs for me. She has money for me. I can use that money to pursue my goals. Maybe if I take the money she gives me and use it to do good things, then that's okay. That's a net positive, right? This is where Roadwarden really shines. It's an example that will stick with me for a long time. All of a sudden, my choices of morality were no longer just a coat of paint I put on my character. They were consequential. I wasn't choosing to be the bad guy and taking Theis's money, increasing Howler's Dell's influence at the cost of innocent people. I was doing it because I wanted that money. I wanted it and I needed it to pursue my goals. In video games, I've killed innocents, I've stolen, I've ended entire alien or fantasy races, I've teabagged, but never have I felt so much guilt than in helping this woman towards her relatively benign goals. But you know what? She helped me towards mine too.